Okay, let's take it from the beginning. In 2017, my mom died. At that time, she and I loved old things, and I had her DNA done for Ancestry, and we decided to look into that. That was in 2017. At that time, I was really not expecting much about our family, right? Because I was the oldest of 7 biological kids. My mom was 13 when she had me. My dad was 17, and my grandma was from West Virginia, and so was my dad's family. And so it just made sense to me. You get the picture, right? So I didn't expect much. Some things confused me because my mom and grandma had a lot of class, and I didn't ever know where it came from. Hindsight. So, what I found was amazing. To begin with, my grandfather, Ball, my grandmother's father, Clarence Ball, was a railroad conductor, but the family had come from great wealth. As a matter of fact, Moses Ball had property next to George Washington and was mentioned in George Washington's diary several times. That was astounding to me. At the same time, I was trying to find out some other information that I didn't connect at the time. So there's that part of it, the ancestry. And through that, I would come to find out so much through reading the diaries and looking at the pictures and the maps, right? I have so many that I could show you. And I'm not going to stop the video, but I will follow up with it. So we actually had 6, I believe. They're not all verified. I think 4 verified direct family members at Jamestown. At the same time, we had been told stories forever that my son was related long-term to Pocahontas. But I couldn't find anything like that at the time. The next year would be really traumatic for me. I can't share a lot, but I can tell you that my son went to prison. And before that happened, there were all kinds of traumas involved. Okay, so that's 2017, 2018. 2018 also, my brother-in-law, who was probably the patriarch of our family, died of leukemia. And that's a whole interesting story in itself, because he had his own funeral before he died, and he was quite the guy, really quite the guy. I had a lot of respect for him. So that's 2018. 2019, I continued to look into Ancestry, but I had some real questions. I started watching Turn, I think is the name of it, which is about the revolution. So I found out that one of our grandfathers made the bullets here. And I was really excited about being related to these people. Here I am thinking I'm like, a waif or a serf or an indentured servant, but really I thought we probably got sent over from jail. that was my perception of our family. Not that they were bad at all, just that we all had struggled with ADHD and trauma, and it's been an interesting ride. And there are a lot of us. Now, at that time, I started really getting into U.S. history. Because now that I think about it, I found out that Pocahontas was murdered in my research trying to find Pocahontas. I also found out that my direct great-grandfather on the Jones side was John Smith. And all these things started connecting. At that time, my best friend and I were separated, and she was studying Bible stuff with a woman that I have a lot of respect for, that I actually went to Salvador with in 1987. She was the lead, and I went to help. And we actually went through the government to minister to the Salvadorian soldiers, which is a whole nother story. They began to learn through a Baptist preacher that Jesus was not real. And Annie and this Baptist preacher went to Egypt and did some checking, and were sure that they were right, that this wasn't true. And my friend kept wanting to tell me this, but I wouldn't let her, because I don't like people telling me things, ever. I don't know, it comes from the oldest. Call me mean, call me selfish, call me ugly. I don't care what you call me. I just like to find things out for myself. And I have a lot of curiosity. And so I'm constantly, boom, 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 looking for stuff. If it's a fossil, if it's a plant, if it's food, if it's country, I am on it. Which is why I studied the Bible like I did. Right? Got to get some water. Okay, so a little bit more. I studied the Bible like nobody's business, man. And, of course, like anybody that's leans towards the intellectual side of spirituality, you end up liking C.S. Lewis and kind of going at it through that direction. I had lots of questions about the Bible. I always had. I never got my answers from anybody, but I was determined to find it. And I wrote a bunch of books about it, and I was a leadership coach for Covey, and I just was an avid learner. I had like 10 Bibles of every kind. I've still got them all. I had Bible dictionaries out the yazoo and commentaries, and I had read them all and taught them. I had married a ton of people and buried a ton of people because I worked in the cemetery and funeral industry for 40 years. So I had some information that maybe other people didn't have. So there you go. You've got the piece of it that is the ancestry, right? And my connection to Pocahontas and to GW and Jamestown, etc. Then you've got the Jesus part of it that my friends found out not real, but I'm not listening because if I'm going to come to that conclusion, it's going to be on my time. So I was ignoring them. At the same time, I was doing some research on that, but the cemetery thing, there's so much I learned from burying people. It's really unbelievable. And you'll see as this picture unfolds how that came to help me really solve some problems. With that cemetery part comes the fact that most of my life I've been a problem solver. And so back in 74, when I got in the cemetery industry, I took over for a man, whole new story, that was a genius and quite the entrepreneur, and was in trouble financially. And I went in at a time when my husband at the time had left me and married someone else, committing bigamy. So I needed to be needed. And this company was having major problems. And I just worked all night long. No matter how long it took, I just did it. I was used to that kind of stuff. We never had structure, bars or rooms or squares. So we just did what was necessary, and so I did. And within a year, I was at the top of the company, and they asked me within a couple years, in 78, so that was 4 years later, to move to Florida to run a bunch of cemeteries and funeral homes. So that part of it, I understood the cemetery business hands down, as well as anybody that I know of. I was a consultant throughout the United States and helped people internationally. As a matter of fact, I'm the one who developed that Christmas candlelight service from a dream I had. So there's a lot that goes into that, and the cemetery industry offers its own set of opportunities. During that time, I would end up catching 3 people in embezzlement and have to call them out, including one that was the son of the doctor that I worked for, who later committed suicide. I would end up uncovering a Baptist preacher that worked as a sales counselor for me, that was borrowing money from the people we buried, from the older people's survivors, and stole the company seal and bought himself a brand new car and showed it to me. And I only found out when I got the bill and they called me asking me why I wasn't paying for this car. And throughout that time, my one boss had a contract on his life, and I ended up finding the FBI file. And the list goes on. The last attorney I worked for really screwed the city over big time. And I left, and that could have been a lawsuit, but it wasn't. But I'm going to tell about that one day because it deserves to be known. So throughout my entire life, I've been uncovering things. It's just been part of my life. Okay, so we're into 2019, and I'm finding out all this stuff about this place for which I had ultimate respect. I mean, good gracious, GW, my grandfather was in his diary. You don't think I'm a Legion, a patriot? And supporting the Orange Man with everything I have because I'm a capitalist, because I work hard and I came from nothing. So there you go. What else is there to be? If I'd have remembered the 60s and 70s, I just forgot them when I started working, like most people. Let's see. So many stories, and I'm trying to stay on this track. The big U. I started researching that and had my computer shut down 3 times because I got to places I wasn't supposed to. And that's when I realized that the internet was not going to help me. And so I started looking into old books and diaries, and I ordered books written by people who had family, and kept amassing, and I paid a great price to learn things. And I found out that most of the books with the goods in them had been discarded. So, as I was finding all that out, and the deception in our beginnings here, and the more I found out, the uglier it got. With the whole JFK thing, and the moon, and the spacewalk, and it just got worse and worse. With the abortion, the prohibition, Sanger. If you could read books like this, it would make you gag. Talking about a caste system, these people had people so compartmentalized into class and who was good, and it was up to society to protect, it was up to government to protect society from people like me. My background. It was obvious. I came from a 13-year-old mother with no education and a 17-year-old father with none. Yeah, I'm the one they wanted to abort. Isn't that just nice? All these years, I worked my ass off and paid so many taxes. And there's a sideline to that. I've had such ADHD and challenges like that from trauma that now I find out I could have had a disability. Not that I would have taken it. But do you think that they give me a break when they audited me 4 times because of this stuff? No. It just gets worse. When you read some of this stuff, one thing leads to another. The insane asylums, Sanger, Planned Parenthood, the Red Cross, every single organization probably has 2. And then you get into the different groups that have changed their names over the years. And you know what you figure out? Pretty soon you go, who the hell is who? Who knows? Because they changed names. And that you might be talking about Apollo and they're talking about, you get the point. Even Shakespeare, that wasn't his name. It was Shakespeare or something like that. And Aristotle was not a philosopher. I know you don't believe me. That's okay. I'll prove it. I got plenty of proof. So you will get the proof. And if I don't give you the proof, you just give me a little comment or send me an email. I'll give you my email address. Send me an email and I will get you the backup to what I'm saying. So at that time, I was devastated. And I figured out the whole Kolomaisky deal. And I knew we were being taken so bad. And I had a friend from over there in the Big U. And he was a vet. And I adored him. And I told him what was what. And of course he was, war. How many are dead? Well, I can tell you two of my friends are. There was one guy over there that I was following that disappeared. And he was dead. His name was Red Pill. You can check him out. He's still got videos up. I had all the documents. I was telling people before it happened. And people that were with me back then will have to vouch for that. I was telling you before it happened. Because I'm a good researcher and I had been onto this. Okay, so 2020 in the Big C. Guess what? I knew how to look up death records. Half my life, I taught people to turn in vital statistic information. And I knew where to get the real goods. And I did. Guess what I'd find out? Biolabs everywhere. All over there, 26 over there. But right here under our noses are the worst. Fort Detrick. And I'll probably not get this through because of that. And what do? My heart sank every day. Every single day. Meanwhile, Epstein and Hunter are going on, and Pelosi, and I'm watching Pelosi tear up paperwork while sitting in the front of Congress on national TV. She's ripping up our documents. And then I'm thinking about the good old guy that left his sperm probably on every sofa up there years ago. You know, Epstein's friend. And I'm thinking, what the hell? Really, what the hell? And of course, I wasn't getting anything in my body from anyone that I didn't know or hadn't researched. But lots of people did, and I tried to tell them. And now you see, because the writing is on the wall. You just have to know where to look. It's been well hidden. All right. So at that time, now we're into 2021, and I call my sister and I go, hey, Kath, since we're in George Washington's diary, let's go to D.C. and support our man and make a weekend of it. We were there, front and center. I was front and center all day. My phone died when I was standing at the door, watching, listening to my husband's voice saying, Cindy, don't. I've got videos of that day. It was the highlight of my life until it was the worst day of my life, which happened because my sister went back to the hotel early, and when I got back at about 8 o'clock, she was watching news and going, oh my God, I was so worried about you. Look at this. Look what's happening. And I went, bullshit. The guards were holding the doors open. That day undid me forever. And I started my journey into truth. And from that point, I began uncovering. The first person that I met along the way was a guy. Well, there's more that goes into this. Let me back up a minute. At the same time, I collect shells, and I've written a couple kids' books, and I collect fossils, and I'm learning about the climate because I'm retired, and I've got tons of stuff. So I run into Randall Carlson, who is teaching sacred geometry, and I am all in. And I start learning from him. And I learn about the great year. And I go, well, why didn't I ever learn about the great year? And when I did, I loved learning the sacred geometry, but I kept thinking, this is too perfect. This is too perfect for creation. And it was. The more I learned, the more I knew something didn't reconcile. Now, at all this time, I'm looking at everything I know about life, going, what the hell? Nothing adds up. My heritage, my history, my understanding, nothing added up. And I kept digging and digging and digging and getting old books and searching and documenting. Right then, I decided to attend what is now called Cosmic Summit, which was a group of about 20 experts on climatology, basically. I wanted to understand what this climate science was about. It didn't make sense to me, and the little whining girl really pissed me off. And so Randall led me in that direction. When that happened, I was also desperately looking for clarity in my spirituality. I knew all my life, I knew that science and spirit could never be separated. They were made by the same source. And one really is not without the other. That's common sense to me. So, why the division? How'd that happen? And I wanted to find out. I did. It was divided on purpose because the right hand and the left hand should never know what each other are doing. That will never do. The job of the controllers is to keep you fighting with your brother and your neighbor and the guy in the other country. Because if we're fighting, we will never have the time, energy, or money to look up the stuff that I found. It is so sad. At that time, I was online looking for something, probably with Randall, taking Randall's course, and I found a guy named Douglas Vogt. I was looking for information on the cycles of the universe, and I found Doug Vogt. So there I am, just lapping up his material. He wrote a book back in the 70s called Reality Revealed, and then he wrote another book, God's Day of Judgment, The Real Cause of Climate Change and Global Warming. And that'll probably get me kicked off for that. I need cards so I can hold them up. So when I found him and all this information that I was searching for, he was from Orange Park, right near here. So I called him and said, can I take you to lunch? He said, yes. I had lunch with him. I bought all his books. I studied him like heck. I had to take physics, I had to take science, I had to take math, I had to take all kinds of things just to get it. And I wanted to share it with you guys right away, but I couldn't. It took me too long to digest it. He's a genius. Randall's a genius. I doubt I'm a genius, although I'm getting smarter every day. So I connected that, and that scared the living daylights out of me, because it showed that the Bible, the Torah, was a code. At that same time, another coincidence, I've always loved language. I've taught leadership all my life. I survived as a child by writing letters and expressing myself. I'm a writer. I write every day. I've got 16 boxes of biblical stuff I've written. Here's a book that I wrote, Deepak Chopra. Back then, the church was like, hated him. And I was asked to write this because I won an international speech contest on humanity. So you could read this and see it's all about Jesus and God. When I do something, I really, really do it. This has been no different. This might be the only thing I've gone all in for that I regret, because it's a heavy load and I feel absolutely responsible for sharing it so that you can help your family in the future. And I happen to believe that humanity is more than they think, or more than they want us to believe. Let's say that. Because I think whoever's in control knows how powerful we are, or they'd never gone to all this trouble to keep us stupid. After reading all of Doug's books, I started understanding the theory of multidimensional reality. And here's what happened. Back in the 70s, Doug and his partner were talking about the pyramids. Doug's into everything like me, or was. He died. Whole different story. That's upsetting to me. Okay, so during that time, Doug was a Jewish man, well-versed in the Torah and in all Judaism. I had another friend that I respected that was a Hasidic Jewish man that I was trying to learn from, but it was very obviously that he was trying to point me in one direction. I'd always voiced my respect for both the Indian family system, the Indians that we've brought over here to America as doctors, etc., business people. I just learned something about that immigration system, interesting, but I won't go into that. So the families that I've met through Toastmasters and through coaching have been just superb families, and so are Jewish families. Well, there's a reason for that. So I start studying the Torah in a new way, not like I had before, in a way through Doug Vogt. I always loved language, always, always, always. So language was key for me. And Doug, that's how I found Doug. And I started learning the codes of the Torah and began to understand in all of this connected perfectly with Randall. So I started determined to get these two together, which never happened. That was right before the Cosmic Summit. When I got to the Cosmic Summit, I stood up in the introduction part. I wish I had it on tape because I would like to, but I stood up and I started researching, and I was looking for a catastrophe that happened, and it wasn't in any of the books. And I just can't understand why. And everybody knew exactly what I was talking about. And I said, I see a lot of problems, but to intentionally deceive your own people is really deep. Everybody there knew exactly what I was talking about. And George called everybody PG researchers, because those of us who are just weird enough and curious enough not to take the bullshit for an answer. There are a lot of us these days. And yeah, we're all as weird as the next one. I'm so thankful for that. Not to be a sheep anymore. I came into this world and I just expected truth. Imagine that. I just thought, why would people lie to you? We've only got one life. We need some truth to live on. But all of it's made up. All of it. Doug helped me so much that I would call him and I'd go, Philo's fake. And he'd say, yep. I could figure it out. I started figuring it out. And then I connected all the parts with the Pizzo family, Constantine, and the whole freaking family. They're all connected. And they all wrote the New Testament. And there's no question. There's so much documentation now. There have been a number of people. I've got all the documents right here, sitting here beside me. Right? Like, can you see all that? I just needed to get some of this out to give you an overview. There's so much. From Doug, I started learning a lot about science and physics. And the most exciting part ever was when I connected from Doug the letters. The Hebrew letters were actually toroids of energy, all with a different XYZ axis, every one of the 22 letters. So I started chanting the Sefer Yetzirah, which is about the foundational letters that Moses supposedly left on the tablets. Now, all this time, I'm connecting other things, right? But I'm reading Doug's work with an intent to understand it so that I can connect other things. The way that Doug came up with all this incredible information, and probably why he isn't here today, is because back in the 77, he was, I believe he was a photojournalist in the war, and he and his partner were saying, why don't we, sorry, I just saw somebody comment, I hate the phone, it's so distracting, and I have to use it, dang. I got some other things here, but no matter, it just is all the same. I'm so distracted anyway. My thoughts go 1,000 different places. So I'm learning the letters, and I got scared with the Kabbalah. I started really meditating, and I could understand the meditation part because of the energy part that I'd learned from Doug. And so I could see the power, like from a Vajra, like how the energy is like a toroidal field of vacuum. And I could see the letters, and I started seeing lots of things, and it scared me. And I told my friend, and he said, you could never get to that point unless you'd spent years and years in it. And what could I say? I know what I experienced, and maybe things are moving quickly these days. I've had a lot of supernatural experiences that cannot be explained. I would believe anything almost today. All right, so where are we? During this time, as you can imagine, I went into the deepest depression of my life, which I'm already prone to. And I made up my mind. I was so suffering. And you can imagine I had such losses. I made up my mind to get to the bottom of my depression, which had come throughout the years and devastated me. So I went to Amen Clinic, who I'd studied back in the 70s and read all his books. I called them. I expected $25,000 for a brain scan. It was only $5,000. So I got myself there, I got a brain scan, I got a diagnosis, and I could begin to really help myself. And guess what I did? I'd been on 200 milligrams of Zoloft for about 30 years, and I just kicked it cold turkey. Right then, with all those losses, I was devastated. And I tried to learn everything I could learn. My goal was to save my family and all the generations following me that would have to live with the trauma and the ADHD and the depression. I was determined to break the curse. And at this point, I knew there was a curse. How? All those hero founders that I was so proud to be associated with, they turned out to be evil crooks. They were a corporation set up over there to come over here and take what we have, or take what they have from whoever. They thought there was gold because of all the gold they had found down out west. And so it was nothing like what we've been told. And I was then embarrassed that I was related to these greedy suckers that set up this system. And then I began to see everywhere that you come in, you colonize, then you convert, and then you control. Because it was so apparent to me, so apparent. And I've totally left out all that part about Rome and the Vatican and all that. But it was so apparent that this was a setup, that we had really been conned, and that it was a system that worked everywhere, had worked everywhere before. And we were just dumb enough to believe what they told us. So many dots, so many synchronicities, stuff you wouldn't believe. I was looking for my grandfather, William Jones. My dad's name was William Jones. I found him, guess where? In India. Yeah. And so I uncovered that piece. So I started learning about, I read about the wonder that was India. And then I met Praveen Mohan and started learning about all Hinduism and the Vajra and how they knew about space long time ago. And I started learning about alchemy and possibilities. And that Randall had been invited to a group of 10 people that were off secluded trying to come up with an answer for our climate. And I asked you guys to pray for them back then. You'll probably remember almost every day I'd say, please remember to pray for Randall Carlson. But I couldn't really say why. And then about a year ago, they came out with that, yes, indeed, they had, through Malcolm Bindle, had developed a motor, a converter that used gas, got the energy from it with absolutely zero exhaust. And I saw it when I was there at Cosmic Summit, during the time that I had also connected a number of things. One was the lightning rods down here from where I hike. I had found this Indian area and where lightning had hit and made like a kiln, acted as a kiln on this wood and petrified it. And I had a bunch of pieces. And so I was able to meet Robert Schott, and he and his wife are the premier experts on Egypt. So I got to connect there. The more I learned, the more I needed to know. And it's been that way. I've gone through so much. I can show you so many fascinating, crazy things. I just can't do it all at once. And if you know ADHD people, which I should be the poster child for because I've created ways around all my life. I even created a color code system for cemetery people that died so it would excite me to help them. So I've married people, buried people. I've helped the government in Salvador. I was married to a John Birch Society coordinator for 6 years, and I taught children about patriotism. I didn't think there'd ever be a day that I wouldn't salute Old Glory, as my grandma said. We've been programmed. Back to Doug. When Doug and his friend got together in 77, they concluded that no one knew what mass was, or matter, or magnetism, or light, and why, and what is consciousness, and from where did we come? There's the biologics section, there's the astrologics section, there's the consciousness, spiritual section. There's so many things, but no one's ever connected them. So Doug and his friends said, what if? This is one big computer. What if there's a CPU in a place, which I now think is the moon? Randall confirmed that it is a type of server. So he thought back then, what if? And they concluded that that would provide the answers to every question under the sun. And it did. He started studying the dimensions and came up with his hypothesis, which I tend to agree with, although I'm not an expert in that area. I know a whole lot about a whole lot, but I'm not an expert in anything. Maybe a couple things. So that's kind of the story. I figured out during this time that not only was the New Testament not written by anyone godly, but it provided principles and values that weren't effective for us as a people. And the more I found out about who we really are, the more I see that all it does is confuse people. The greats, the ancients, and you can get those books. I've got quite a few up there, and you can get those books, and you can go to the Harvard Library or, one of the Ivy League colleges. Go online to their library. The one I go to is the Avalon. And you can get those ancient documents, and I read every damn one of them. Rich stuff. But it says, know thyself. And the Bible wants you to focus on every damn thing outside of you. Love the neighbor. You don't know how to love the neighbor. You don't even know how to love yourself. You don't even know what love is. Is it sex? Is it attraction? And no one knows, because the word's kind of a cheap word. It meant luffa, or to care for. One of the things that happened during this was that I got this book and I read Le Clef Hermetique, which confirms that this universe, multiverse, is on a cycle of 12,068 years. And during that time, it resets. And there are cataclysms from sunspots are the indicators, but the sun is really the modulator of what happens. And when the sunspots, I've got books old books where they counted the sunspots day after day, because this was the information that would tell them what to expect. Throughout this journey, I have met some extraordinary people. Some that I would point out are Jason Brashear from Archaics. He was in prison, decided to chronologically keep track of the world history, and he has truth. The only thing that I found problematic with his work, which I refer to and use often, is that he didn't take into consideration that, like Aristotle, for instance, there's nothing in history about Aristotle being a philosopher in the old books. The only reference to him is in the Peloponnesian War in Loeb's classic library, which is a cost a fortune, but you can get stuff from it, and Doug had the whole set. But the only reference to Aristotle in that whole dang thing is as a general. There's so much. The whole story of Moses, of Joseph, of Abraham, Doug gave his rendition for. Doug was and is my hero. Did Doug want us to lean more towards a Hebrew paradigm of our history? I'm sure he did. Nevertheless, the man taught me more than I learned in a lifetime before him. And he was so generous. I would call him up. I remember one time and I said, Doug, does the energy in the letter represent our word, that XYZ, or our intention? And he said, you can find it on page 54. I'll leave you with that. I hope I've given you some idea of where I'm coming from. What do I want? I've written that out so clearly, along with so many other things that I felt like I needed to do. I've got one list of everything I know personally to be true. It's a short list, a Post-it size. I've got a list of things to consider when you're inspecting or researching, and it's huge. You've got to watch for so many different things. There's so many ways. Well, think about this. Just the Torah had a minimum of 13 codes that I know of used in it. I believe that we live in an informational system of reality. And I've learned a lot, and my goal is to help you to make application of this information to help humanity unite as one, maybe for the first time, and to forget all the feuding and fighting and division they continue to heap on us. If you look back, and I will share everything I've got, you can clearly see that it was a game for them. I'm sorry, but it was. I do believe that there were honorable intentions during some parts of our experience here, but it's been a pretty damn big deception. We've had 6 Earth Ages. I've got calendars and calendars and calendars. One of my favorite books is this, and I've learned so much. One of the neatest parts of it is how you see the land. It's coming apart. I've got to get some help with it because it's so valuable. But the information in here told me that they knew a lot more about space than they admitted. Another thing that's been very cool is this, and I've got all of the journals, and this is amazing. One day I hope to finish all of it, but if you open it up, it's actually like a newspaper back then. And you can read their recipes and all that stuff. Amazing stuff. All bullshit. But, okay, one more thing. Let's see, I was thinking about that book and the maps. And then I was thinking about something else that I thought was really important. This is called Our National Calamity, and it's a list of cataclysms as opposed to determinism, and all these different floods, 3 floods in Indiana, all this stuff that Randall helps you to understand, so that, like what I'm trying to do now, instead of stuff it down your throat, I'm trying to teach you what I found and let you be your own guide, like I have to let me be mine. I talked about Le Clef Hermetique. I talked about all the global information that's been hidden, all the star records that we've never heard about and should have. I've done work on all the biology and genetics and epigenetics and understanding our DNA, and it looks like There are a lot of things that affect us. And the bottom line maybe is that this is a spiritually scientific world built by information. And if we can learn the information, we can help ourselves. But primarily, we've got to join hands. It really is us against them. And people are reluctant and they're comfortable. And here's my fear. I fear that the sun will continue to do what it does and to do what it has done every cycle of years for the past millions. And if it does what it's always done, it looks like we could have a Carrington event. A Carrington event is when the pulses of plasma from the sun are so strong and we don't have protection, and it blows the grid. Can it blow the grid? It used to, right? Can it now? Are the wires buried or somewhere else? Who the hell knows? We don't know. But if it happens, we will have no cell phones. I was out of town when the AT&T thing went down. We lost that. And there were two businessmen that didn't have their airplane tickets or their hotel reservations or any phone numbers. And they were stuck out of town. Now, what if that was your grandchild and we did lose power? That's my goal, to protect the kids until we can figure some things out. I hope that helps. Please comment. I have so much more, and I'm going to try and divide it into categories. And that's the other thing I wanted to share, is how the whole damn world is compartmentalized so that we don't talk to each other. Don't get me started.